Good evening and welcome. Let's begin with our chant as usual. Usual. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening, welcome. We continue with our exploration of the five dharmas of Maitreya, and then in particular diving into the Dharma Dharmata Vibhanga, the distinction or distinguishing between phenomena and their essence. So I truly believe that we made it through the first three of the five texts, and Kempo Brunholzl's wonderful presentation of the overview of the five texts, my Maitreya texts. And we're on page 57 of his text, the Madhyanta Vibhaga, and that is. Are people using the source book or just the excerpts I sent? I actually sent a really much nicer version of this document, the digital of this. Oh, I see. Yeah, the original was great. So hopefully you're using the original. The one in the source book wasn't that good. I sent a revised one. Anyway, let's see. Okay, so we're in the Madhyanta Vibhanga. The distinction between the middle and extremes, which is 109 verses plus three additional ones, so 112 verses, so not a very long text, in five chapters, explains the basic principles as well as the vast paths of all three yanas, emphasizing the Yogacara view and the distinctive features of the Mahayana, in particular the first and fifth chapters. In those, the text presents the profound Yogacara middle way through clearly and finely delineating what does not exist ultimately and what does exist on the levels of relative and ultimate reality, as well as through eliminating all kinds of dualistic extremes. So this is a text on the middle way view from the Yogacara point of view. Chapter 1 on the characteristics discusses those of afflicted phenomena consisting throughout of false imagination or mental projections in terms of the three natures, which are the imaginary, the dependent, and the consummate, and how these afflicted phenomena arise. What is purified, i.e. emptiness, is taught through its characteristics, i.e. the lack of duality, the very nature of the lack of duality, being neither existent nor non-existent, and being neither one nor different. Interesting list of characteristics of phenomena from the ultimate point of view. Non-dual. What is the difference between the first one, lack of duality, and the second one, the very nature of the lack of duality? Um, let's see, we take a slight detour, and I want to share with you the root text of this, the actual words of this text, so you get a flavor for what Carl is talking about. So here we have the middle and extremes by Tres Madhyantava Bhaga, with commentaries by Khenpo Shenga and Shu Mipom. There's basically a series that this translation committee, Dharmachakra, set out to accomplish, of translating all five of the Dharmas with commentaries by Khenpo Shenga and Shu Mipom, and then they got derailed after a few of them by Dzongkhar Khyentse Rinpoche's project on the 84,000, translating the Sutras of the Buddha. Somebody thought that would be more useful. Let's see. The first stanza is a killer, which is why I'm using up this valuable time to get to it. Sorry I didn't prep where it is. Okay, you ready? Here's the first verse that summarizes the treatise. Characteristics, obscurations, reality, remedies, the basis for this, the attainment of the fruition, and the Mahayana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 topics. Okay, so that was the summary. The second stanza begins the presentation, the way things are, right? The way things are. False imagination exists. In it, the two do not exist. Emptiness exists here, and within it, that exists as well. Not empty, not empty. This explains it all, because of existence, non-existence, and existence. This is the path of the middle way. Now, if you didn't know that, the context and see the formality of this book and everything, you just saw this, you might think somebody was joking with you, playing a practical joke, because clearly the editing for Maitreya Sangha, I don't know, his editing capabilities were. So this has been one of the hardest stanza or two stanzas in all of the Buddhist history to parse out and understand what's being presented. And I don't know, we went through this text and the commentary didn't make it a whole lot clearer in a course a few years ago, but just to give you a little taste of the complexity of this text. And it's a little bit, so when we see Carl saying, oh, it's a clear presentation, it's a little bit funny that he says that. What is purified? Emptiness is taught through its characteristics. We did that. Its synonyms. Synonyms for emptiness. Suchness. Dharmadhatu. Its divisions. Being stained and stainless were consisting of the 16 emptinesses. So either there's two, emptiness that is stained or emptiness that is stainless, or the 16 emptinesses, and the rationale for its being afflicted and purified. So, presentation of reality from the point of view of the three natures presented in the Yogacara tradition, which are the imaginary nature is what we project as being there. We project onto appearance. The dependent nature is appearance. That appears dependent upon causes and conditions. And then the true nature of the dependent, which is called the completely perfected nature, which is uh, the the emptiness of the imaginary and the emptiness of the dependent natures. So it's like taking the two truths and saying the relative truth is the realm of cause and effect, and that's the dependent nature. And then within that realm of cause and effect, there's deluded sentient beings who think that there are things like trees and people and cars and up and down and big and small, and all of that is imaginary. So it's interesting, like, why do they break it in that way? It seems like their agenda in doing that is to provide a distinction between the basis upon which we project things and the projections. And sort of where in the Madhyamaka tradition, the basis for appearances is a little bit overlooked, let's say. I think in this presentation, the basis, that which appears interdependently, um, is explored in a more granular and a sort of experiential way. And the dependent nature is summed up as being the Alaya Vijnana. So the Alaya Vijnana, we each have our own Alaya Vijnanas, the eighth consciousness, but our Alaya Vijnanas are conditioned and by the context of this universe that we all find ourselves in. And so we all have basically identical Alaya Vijnana. Alaya Vijnanas in terms of the environment, the projection of the the container that sentient beings dwell in. So this comes up in our current text of like there's the container, the display of context, and then there's the contained as the sentient beings, and each sentient being has their own Alaya Vijnana, which is their stream of consciousness that has incurred cause and effect, and thereby, i.e., karma over beginningless aeons. Cynthia.
Um, just um, in terms of the, like, if the view is that we are sort of projecting, that based on our Alaya Vijnana, right? Is that what we're saying, right? That we're sort of creating the,
Well, the Alaya Vijnana is like a projection. The environment is the projection quality of the Alaya Vijnana.
right,
The
okay,
Alaya Vijnana has sort of an outer projection and an inner, like feeling of being uh, inside
right,
it.
right, okay. So the question that I had as you were explaining this is that if the outer is a projection of the Alaya Vijnana, then doesn't that mean that this thing, the universe or container that we're talking about, is our own projection? So how is it that we can talk about it as being a common container if it's actually coming from the projection? Do you understand what I mean?
I think so, and the explanation that's given is that we've all um, been in this world realm for a very long time, and we were born in this world realm because we have similar karma, and so we began as sentient beings in this world realm aeons ago, and we've all been experiencing um, like through our our interactions. We don't project each um,
I mean, I guess the question is, even when you're using the terms what a world realm, I mean, I understand the idea that we have common conditioning of some kind. I mean, I've heard this before. I understand that conceptually, at least. But in a sense, what my mind is saying is, how is there such a thing as a world realm? Isn't that a fictional construct also? Is this notion of there being some kind of container or world realm or whatever we want to call it, is that really true? If or
well, this is fascinating subject and also like totally mind bending and but if we look at the Buddhist view of cosmology or whatever you call it, cosmogony, there's this view that there's aeons of world realms, and which are described as like time periods of where there's basically there's like a beginning of the appearance of a world realm, and then gradually there's the collapse of that world realm. And they describe the collapse as happening by either fire, wind, or water, or solidity. And then everything dissolves back into emptiness, and then the next aeon appears of that world of a world realm, another world realm aeon. And so what does that mean in terms of the view of like mind only? So if everything is mind, taking that as a basis for uh, trying to figure out what they're talking about, then there's some sort of mind that explodes, that is born in that when the aeon, the world realm appears, and then the world realm develops, and so sentient beings are like appear in that world realm, and they don't theoretically sentient beings are never originated. They come from some other world realm, and they appear in that world realm. I'm trying to like build a storyline based on their presentation, that what limited sort of details are provided. And
right,
so
yeah,
all
okay,
there's some sense if everything is mind, then mind begins a display, and sentient beings appear in that display. But is there a display separate from the sentient beings, or do all the sentient beings like um, appear in that world realm together? I don't know. It's it's beyond
okay.
my comprehension.
Right. I mean, I didn't expect there would be an easy answer, and I certainly don't want to derail the class for this. But it would be good maybe to explore it at some point because I find that there's sort of an inconsistency. That's, of course, the conceptual mind likes to find consistency in these views. And this is one that I'm struggling with
Big
whether,
time, yeah. So there's two parts. Just like to try to conclude it. There's two parts, I think, to the this idea. One is that everything is mind, which I think when we hear that, we we think that everything is sort of illusory in a way that I'm not sure if that's intended. But I think it's more that there's not two different substances in reality, matter and mind. That there's just like science, we have this notion of the observer affecting the observed. There's a quality of um, reality manifesting in terms of observer and observed. And then there's this idea that I don't know. There's like what we'll see in our text if we ever freaking get to it is there's this thing called two abodes, and one abode is the shared abode that we have in common. So all sentient beings in this world realm share a common abode. They share a common projected environment where we all like see the same colors, the same supposed objects appear. We see the same appearances. And then there's the unshared abode, which is our mental continuum, where we all have our opinions and our experiences and the collection of those two.
And our birth and death and all of that is individual, right?
Right.
I think that's part of that.
So
Right.
how do those weave together is like I don't know, you know, and there is this notion that aeons begin and end, and world systems begin and end in a similar manner to a Big Bang and an expansion of the universe. And so, like, uh, you know, that begs the question of like, well, are there sentient beings at the beginning of that aeon? And that of the beginning of that world system's new aeon, are they there then? Or does sentient beings come from somewhere else? Or does that world realm like segment into different sentient beings? And and are we really all one being? You know, is the universe like one being that somehow bifurcates into the solution that we're all separate? You know, you can
Don't they
back.
always say that, like, no, it's not one mind and all that sort of stuff? It seems like often in teachings when people ask questions about this, they sort of
Yes,
reject
yes,
those
but
notions.
so like that then it's a matter of like how you explain that. So at the beginning of the aeon, um, does it appear? Do sentient beings appear instantly? And you know, one
So,
option.
I mean, does the world realm and the aeon exist i without
It
like
sounds like it does when they describe the beginning of a world realm's aeon.
and yet they seem to be
They
telling
go
us always,
through fire, water, earth, and then these things appear, you know, gradually, like
right, it
developing,
sounds very
sort of
biblical.
like biblical and evolution. It's like, are we back in Bible here, land? Um, or is it like, you know, another option that's not necessarily a bad one is like sentient beings we project the past, and the past doesn't really exist. We created, we like thought about and discovered the past, and then we go about and find evidence of it. And the evidence appears magically to match what we figured it would be.
Right. I mean, yeah, okay, because it seems like, since they spend a lot of time telling us that everything comes through our
We
mind,
should
all
someday
experience.
we should like have a day long and like, okay, let's play this out. What does it actually mean when they say if everything is mind only? How does that, what's the ramifications of that? How do we explain
Right. And
that?
I don't mean it in terms of the narrower mind only. I mean,
No.
it's the broader mind only that people do accept. Like, even in Ken's book, it came up, a little paragraph I remember seeing that where he was saying, when we talk about everything being mind, it doesn't mean this, and this. But of course, he doesn't then say this is what it does
What
mean.
it does mean.
And I don't know if that's just him being a Menyamakan or, that there is no way of articulating it. but it's the same kind of question. Anyway, thank you so much for, and I,
Yeah, we should pursue that. Yeah, we did a course years ago on the Abhidharma on cosmology, and it has a whole description. There's like the Abhidharma description of the cosmogony, and the Vajrayana descriptions, and then there was the Kala Chakra descriptions, and they were all slightly different. But
it's just the, again, there's just so many different ways where these things come up and they don't seem to jive. I mean, even one, I cannot find it for the life of me, but in one of Trala Rinpoche's more recently issued books, there was some line where it said, of course there's external objects. I'm like, okay, like what,
yeah,
I,
so
I trust him quite implicitly, but then, it does seem to
well,
come.
there's two ways of interpreting that. One is maybe he's saying that external objects exist as separate material phenomena, separate from mind. But maybe he's saying that, yeah, sure, there's external objects that are external to us, but they are uh, made up of mind.
Right. I'm not, since I can't find it again, I haven't been able to like examine that more thoroughly.
Yeah.
So,
It's sort of like if you break down phenomena into their um, ultimate parts, and if you can't find any ultimate parts, then what is that phenomena? And where to, you know, just there's some scientists here somewhere, like Morgan, like how do scientists explain how atoms go from imperceptible to conglomerates that are perceptible? Where does that occur, and how does that occur? Morgan.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're asking, but I mean, the atoms are sort of floating in space near each other, and they have like a relationship to each other where they're sharing electrons or something like that, or they have other kinds of bonds between the atoms. But they're just sort of floating in space. Is that what you mean?
Well, at what point do are they perceptible when they combine with like 5 Brazilian other atoms? Then they're
Yeah, I mean, well,
perceptible.
they combine into molecules. So, like, there are some substance like H2O or whatever, NaCl or something, and then yeah, masses of those would join together till they become perceptible.
Okay.
I think Inez has an idea.
Inez.
Um, yeah, we're also forgetting that we only have a few senses. I mean, there's all these other things that could be out there we don't even know. When you think about optical illusions and how other insects see, and there's things that aren't we don't even know about. Probably. I mean, we're only humans.
Well said. So let's keep skimming through. So we're just trying to get an overview of these 5 texts. So we're in this text, this Madhyantava Bhaga, which is the separation between middle and extremes, and the middle is the middle way view, and we're distinguishing the middle way view from the view of the extremes. And the extreme views are saying that things either exist the way they appear or they don't exist at all. And the middle way is saying that they are neither one nor many, and they're neither existent nor non-existent, which leaves you in a sort of limbo place. Chapter 2 talks about obscurations, afflictive and cognitive, and chapter 3 talks about um, the true realities, the detailed on true reality is a detailed presentation of the three natures in terms of their characteristics and relationship with the four realities of noble ones, which is a more accurate way of translating what is usually translated as the Four Noble Truths. So the idea of the Four Noble Truths is that it's four true situations as perceived by noble ones, or that noble ones can see. Noble ones see reality as having four aspects: suffering, etc. Um, Chapter 4 discusses the path as the remedy. So first we have, chapter 1 is like the main view. Chapter 2 goes into detail on the afflictions of deludedness. Chapter 3 talks about the, let's see, after the obscurations, chapter 3 sort of talks about the three natures as being a way of giving you a deeper insight into the experience of delusion and non-delusion. And then chapter 4 is the path from delusion to non-delusion. And chapter 5 is explains the Mahayana and how the greatness of the Mahayana path, the Mahayana version of everything that went before. Let's see, the last one, Dharma Dharmata Vibhaga, which is our text, is a short text, 300 lines, that discusses the difference between samsara confusion and liberating power of non-conceptual wisdom, i.e. the heart essence of all the profound sutras. So it's a good text to focus on, sounds like. Enables us to discriminate ignorance and its manifestations from wisdom from wisdom, discriminate ignorance and its manifestations from wisdom as the motor of the path to liberation. So the process of discriminating reality and delusion acts as a motor that propels us along the path. The introductory section first provides the distinction and the defining characteristics of phenomena and the nature of phenomena. So while he's doing this, I thought it'd be good to show the outlines of our text. So here's the outline of can I switch texts here and you still see it? Do you see the outline or do you still see Carl's?
Seeing the outline.
Okay. Okay. So here is the outline of the text. We have some introductory material before the actual text begins in the book that we have. The commentators, the homage, etc. And then we have the brief presentation. Is basically the essence of cyclic existence, samsara, and nirvana, the transcendence of suffering. And then I have to fix this. This is really the first of these 6 points, the presentation of phenomena in 6 points. So there's the characteristics of phenomena and their intrinsic nature. So the brief presentation is there's samsara and nirvana. And then the extensive presentation is describing phenomena. Samsara and nirvana consist of phenomena and their intrinsic nature. Let's start with phenomena. Phenomena have basic characteristics. And what is the support for these characteristics, the rationale, or the reason that we understand them in the way we do? And are phenomena and their nature the same or different? This is really good question. Like, we're more familiar with emptiness. So when we say that a table is empty, is the table the same or different from its emptiness? And I think we all know the answer. What's the answer? Are phenomena in their intrinsic nature the same or different? Neither. Right? They can't be the same and they can't be different. The basis or abodes, which I talked about earlier, is the container, the environment, and the contain, the sentient beings that have their own continuums. Um, those that are in common are the environment, and those not in common are the mental streams of phenomena. And then the point that this text focuses on is the aspects of apprehension and apprehended. So when we talk about mind only, we say instead of there being a subject, a perceiver, and an external independent phenomena that is perceived by that perceiver or that sentient being, we're saying that those that there is no external phenomena. And so, how does apprehension happen? You know, what if everything is like one closed system? What's the difference between apprehending something and or perceiving something and not perceiving it? And we have that experience. All these phenomena appear in our visual field or maybe our auditory field, and we pay attention. We apprehend like a minuscule amount of what appears to our senses, right? Out of all the objects in our rooms right now, we see the computers or our lamp, a few objects, the chairs, tables, and we apprehend those. And so, is that something different than the phenomena that are not apprehended? And sort of looking at how does the idea of mind only is that there's a continuity of phenomena. There's not two different classes of phenomena. And so then how does this illusion of there being two different types of phenomena, a perceiver and a perceived, arise if it's a closed system? Okay, then let's shift to the intrinsic nature of phenomena in 6 points. What are their characteristics? What are their basis? Um, what is the cognition of them, their ascertainment? And these are code words, it turns out, uh, for the 5 paths. The second, third, fourth, and fifth paths of the 5 paths. So the first path is the path of accumulation, and that's not explicitly covered. The second path is the path of preparation or joining. And this text focuses on the second path, which is really cool because that's like really our focus as practitioners is to understand and bring about and accomplish what's supposed to be accomplished on the second path. And it boils down to that second path of preparation or unification to being understanding and experiencing the absence of perceiver and perceived, subject and object, non-duality, to put it simply. And based on understanding that and then experiencing it, we have what they call in this text, what the author calls contact, which is the path of seeing, and then recollection is what we normally call either meditation or familiarization, and then no more learning, i.e., full enlightenment, Buddhahood, is here called the final fundamental transformation. And as we talked about briefly last week, this whole issue of transformation is very dicey. It's like, what actually changes? If Buddha nature is changeless, what changes in enlightenment? And okay, we can say, well, it only changes from the sentient being's point of view. From the Buddha's point of view, nothing changes. But anyway, the remainder of the text explores the features of the fundamental transformation from a sentient being into enlightened Buddha under 10 topics: nature, essence, entity, substance, the individuals, their distinct features, the requirements for the transformation, the basis for the transformation has further detail, the focal points for complete understandings. And then there's the seventh one is, okay, how do we bring together like these six things and direct the mind? How do we meditate? How do we focus our attention and understanding? And then how do we continue to apply that? Sort of like understanding what to do, how to direct the mind, and then doing it. What are the flaws that appear on that path? What are the mistakes that can appear? And then what are the benefits of doing it? So that's our text. I've also given you a little summary outline, a little bit shorter. Basically, laying out the subject, laying out the framework of the text, the samsara nirvana, and samsara is the realm of phenomena, nirvana is the realm of intrinsic essence or nature as emptiness, and this question of are phenomena and their nature the same or different is sort of the avenue into exploring the path. And then the two things, the presentation of phenomena, presentation of their intrinsic nature, and then the transformation. So back to Carl. Let's see. So the introductory section provides the distinction of phenomena and their nature, and then the rationale for both, the ultimate existence, non-existence of phenomena, so the rationale, the reasonings for understanding phenomena as being non-existent, and their seeming appearance is that both these elements are necessary in order to account for mistakenness and unmistakenness, as well as affliction and purification. Let's see. The rationale for uh, putting forward the idea that phenomena are ultimately non-existent and yet they seem to appear, and putting forward the notion, the reasoning that both elements are necessary in order to account for what we find ourselves in, that there's sentient beings who are deluded and there's Buddhas. And so that's why we talk about phenomena as being non-existent, and or phenomena appearing but being non-existent. When investigated, they are neither the same nor different. Then follows the detailed explanation of phenomena with 6 points. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Points 4 and 5, talking about the abode, consists of the twofold matrix of phenomena, or the twofold manner in which phenomena manifest. The world is the environment and the sentient beings that live in it. The world is the surroundings of sentient beings that experience as something in common among them. As for sentient beings, certain elements, behaviors, qualities, faults are also experienced in common. Some of them are shared, while others, such as happiness, suffering, karma, bondage, liberation, are strictly individual, private experiences. In general, however, both the world and the beings in it consist of nothing but a multitude of individual mind streams. Interesting statement. That certain groups of beings, such as humans, experience a seemingly common external world is only due to the fact of the mind streams of these beings containing similar imprints that appear to each one of them individually as their own projections of a world, but are mistaken by all of them for constituting an actual shared environment outside of their individual mind streams. So that's how Carl sums it up. The text also makes it clear that the minds of others can never be a direct object of another mind, only a reflection in that other mind, be it in ordinary states of mind or in meditation. So, saying even the enlightened ones, it seems, cannot perceive the minds of others directly. It seems to be saying, which is a little bit odd. Thus, the text and the Yogacara system in general maintains that whatever is perceived is nothing but appearances in our individual mind streams, without thereby falling into the extreme of solipsism, which I think is sort of like everything is in my mind. Point 6 discusses the non-existence of the appearance of apprehender and apprehended. Would appear as objects do not exist externally apart from mind as the perceiver in which they appear. Consequently, what appear, using the plural, what appear as the apprehenders of such objects do not exist either. This logic of like, if objects don't appear, if objects are not truly there, then perceivers are not truly there, because subjects depend on objects. Subjects only exist in relationship to objects, which is a very different way of viewing the reality of mind. Consequently, what appear as the apprehenders of such objects do not exist either. Nevertheless, it is by virtue of beginningless latent tendencies that the seeming duality of apprehender and apprehended keeps appearing to ordinary beings. Beginningless latent tendencies, when did those begin? The detailed explanation of the nature of phenomena is 6 points. The defining characteristic, which was covered above, the matrix of the nature, where the nature of phenomena is found, consists of all phenomena as well as the Buddhist teachings that explain them. Penetration refers to the path of preparation of properly engaging in the Mahayana scriptures through conceptual study, reflection, and meditation. Contact represents the path of seeing, on which the nature of phenomena is realized directly in a non-conceptual manner for the first time, whereas the path of preparation is conceptual. The nature of phenomena is realized directly in a non-conceptual manner for the first time. That's the traditional Mahayana point of view, that practitioners on the path of preparation do not have flashes of direct non-conceptual experience of the true nature of reality, which is not something that everybody agrees with. Recollection is the path of familiarizing with what was seen on the path of seeing, thus gradually eliminating all afflictive and cognitive obscurations. The arrival of the true nature of the nature at the true nature of the nature phenomena is the main subject of the entire text. It is explained as the fundamental change in 10 points, which represents the most detailed discussion of this topic in Buddhist literature. The nature of the fundamental change refers to the direct appearance of suchness without any adventitious stains whatsoever. The threefold substance or entity of the fundamental change, that is, what changes into suchness, consists of mind appearing as the outer world, mind appearing as sentient beings, and the Dharma Dhatu, as found in the sutras, all having changed into suchness. Those three things, isn't that cool? Which respectively result in the manifestation of pure Buddha realms, which is the outer realm of perceived by a Buddha, and the realization of qualities, the ability to teach the profound and vast Dharma, and the direct perception of everything that is to be known, the wisdom. So the two types of wisdom, understanding the nature and then understanding the extent of phenomena. The persons who undergo this fundamental change are twofold. The foundation, that is the suchness of the mind streams of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, changes completely so that it's free of obscuration, while the fundamental changes of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas are only partial only partially free from obscurations. The distinctive features of the fundamental change are the attainment of the Dharmakaya, the three kayas. The prerequisites consist of previous aspirational activities such as prayers, the Mahayana teachings as are focused, and the trainings that takes us along the 10 bhumis. The sixth point, non-conceptual wisdom is the foundation of the fundamental change, is the main topic in the discussion of the fundamental change and may be considered the heart of this text. Non-conceptual wisdom is explained in 6 points, starting with its focal objects, the Mahayana teachings, aspiring for them, gaining certainty and completing the accumulations, then the relinquishment of characteristics, abandoning the 4 progressively more subtle conceptions about antagonistic factors, their remedies, suchness, and realization. So the 4 progressively more subtle conceptions about antagonistic factors is the sort of the most, I think, the most important aspect of this text and the whole process of presentation of the transformation, and I think we'll be focused in. And this was explained in detail in that Dharani that we read last week. The fourfold correct yogic practice to approach or cultivate non-conceptual wisdom consists of the 4 well-known Mahayana prayogas. Prayogas are like, what are they, higher yogas, something like that. Observing all phenomena as being nothing other than mind, not observing them as their external objects, not observing the observer or apprehender of such objects either, and observing that the duality of apprehender and apprehended is actually unobservable. I think that I think the opposite of those 4 are these 4 progressively more subtle conceptions about antagonistic factors, and that this fourfold practice is the heart of the situation. The defining characteristics of non-conceptual wisdom are threefold. The first is non-conceptual wisdom rests in the non-dual and inexpressible nature of phenomena. The second means that duality, designation, sense faculties, objects, cognizance, and the outer world do not appear for non-conceptual wisdom. And the outer world, do not appear for. The third characteristic means that all phenomena appear equal to space during meditative equipoise and appear like illusions during subsequent attainment. So in the technical, traditional language, subsequent attainment is the experience of individuals who have achieved the path of seeing when they emerge from their meditative equipoise. They then experience subsequent attainment. Every moment from the path of seeing onward outside of meditative equipoise is subsequent attainment, in that we're trying to bring together our experience, which remains an experience of appearances as seeming to be different than the perceiver, trying to merge that or align that with the experience that we have in equipoise of no duality of perceiver and perceived. The benefit of this non-conceptual wisdom attainment of the Dharmakaya, supreme bliss, mastery over overseeing the suchness and variety of all noble objects, mastery over the manifold ways of teaching. So Buddhahood, the thorough knowledge of non-conceptual wisdom, is fourfold. The knowledge about its being a remedy. It remedies the fivefold clinging to what to realize. Remedies the fivefold clinging to what is non-existent. This is sort of a long list, so I'm going to skip this. The thorough knowledge, which is the second of the four knowledges of the defining characteristic of non-conceptual wisdom, refers to the exclusion of 5 misconceptions about what it is. So first was the 5 correct aspects of non-conceptual wisdom, and then the second is the understanding the misconceptions about what it is, and then C, the knowledge of its distinctive features. Its 5 features of being non-conceptual, not limited in its scope, not abiding in samsara nirvana, remaining in the nirvana without remainder of the skandhas, and being unsurpassable. And the knowledge, finally, of its functions 4 refers to its 5 functions of distancing itself from conceptions, granting unsurpassable bliss, freedom from obscurations, and engaging in all aspects of knowledgeable objects, and finally purifying Buddha realms, maturing sentient beings, and in granting omniscience. The 7th of the 10 points of the fundamental change to mental engagement means to realize that by virtue of being ignorant about suchness, delusive appearance of actually non-existent false imagination and duality out of the alaya consciousness prevents the appearance of the nature of phenomena. That's why we don't see the nature of phenomena correctly, because of delusive appearance of false imagination and the duality of the alaya consciousness, and that the nature of phenomena appears once false imagination and duality cease. The manner of approaching such realization consists of the fourfold yogic practice explained above. The trainings to accomplish the change consist of the level of engagement through aspiration, i.e. the path of preparation, and then direct realization on the first bhumi, seeing the remaining 6 impure and 3 pure bhumis, the path of familiarization, bhumis 2 through 10, and the effortless and uninterrupted enlightened activity of a Buddha, 11th bhumi, path of no more learning. Last 2 points of the change, the shortcomings of there being no fundamental change, or when there is no, and the benefits are fourfold. With the benefits being the reverse of the shortcomings. And I think we can skip those. But let's see. And then the text ends with some examples. For both the fleeting nature of the adventitious stains and the immutability of the nature of phenomena, as the ever unchanging foundation of the fundamental change that is only revealed when stains have been eliminated. So, a little bit of a complicated text, sort of heavy, but exciting, and has a happy ending.
It's funny how they talk about the fleeting nature of these stains, and then on the flip side,
Yeah, when
and
are they going to fleet?
right, the eons that you have to go through to you know, get through the path, and
It's all a finger snap, right?
that's right, different perceptions of time.
And then finally, the 5th text by Maitreya is the ultimate continuum of the Mahayana, the Uttara Tantra, also known as the Ratnagotrava Bhagga, which is the separation of the jewel from the family, which is a complicated subject I'm not going to go into unless he does. The general commentary on all the Buddha Nature Sutras represents a bridge between Sutra and Tantra, discuss the nature of our mind as the very basis of everything on the Buddhist path. The first chapter begins with a brief introduction of its main topics called Vajra points. So the Uttara Tantra has 7 Vajra points. That is followed by a description of the first 3 of these points, which are the 3 jewels, and an overview of the inconceivability of the last 4 Vajra points, which are, let's see, the Buddha nature, Tathagata's point 4, the central subject of the text, primarily discussed by way of 3 topics: the reasons all beings possess Buddha nature, presentation in 10 points of Buddha nature, blah, 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 and then 9 examples for Buddha nature that help us understand it. Let's see. Buddha nature is realized through faith or confidence. It's being empty of adventitious states, but not empty of inseparable qualities. Verse 154 to 5, famous verse, and the purpose of its being taught, which is also, removes qualms about other sutras, teaching that all phenomena are emptiness, how to reconcile these two. Chapter 2 on Buddha awakening, which is point 5. So the awakening or transformation, fundamental change, lists 8 points. And I'll skip those. And then chapter 3 on the qualities of Buddhahood. Point 6 introduces 32 qualities of freedom belonging to the Dharmakaya and the 32 qualities of maturation belonging to the Rupakayas. Rupakayas being a term that includes Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. And this is followed by a verse with an example for each one of the 3 sets of the qualities of freedom, the 10 powers, and so forth. Chapter 4 on enlightened activity opens with 2 verses about this activity's main features of being effortless and uninterrupted. The 7th point, enlightened activity. Enlightened activity is effortless and uninterrupted, but activity is explained in more detail through 6 points, which I won't list, and then the features of enlightened activity are illustrated through 9 examples, and then a summary. Chapter 5 on the benefit of the teaching of the Tathagata heart, Buddha nature, demonstrates the merit of even just hearing about it, let alone studying and practicing it, is superior to everything else. Followed by 4 verses that describe on which basis the Uttara Tantra was explained and so forth as a conclusion. Let's see, dedication. In sum, the 5 texts are mainly based on Prajnaparamita, Madhyamaka, the classical teachings of Yogacara, and the teachings of Buddha nature. In that way, they cover the 3 main streams of Indian Mahayana Buddhism, Madhyamaka, Yogacara, and Tathagata Garba. Different Tibetan masters have voiced all kinds of opinions about the Maitreya texts, representing the views of certain Buddhist schools, such as Mind-only, Chettamatra, Yogacara, Madhyamaka, or Zhendong. However, as far as one's practice goes, Trungpa Rinpoche says it is necessary to determine, even in the Madhyamaka view, that appearances are nothing but mind, to resolve that mind is empty, and to realize mind's emptiness in meditation. Interesting summary in those 3 of the 4 stages of Vipassana, basically. According to the so-called mind-only school, that mind is ultimately existent, but nothing like that is said anywhere in the Maitreya text, which Carl mentioned before. So from that point of view, it can be said that all 5 texts belong to Madhyamaka in general, and in particular, the distinction between phenomena and their nature. The current text that we have, Dharma Dharmatava Bhanga, and the Ultimate Continuum, present the view of the Zhentong Madhyamaka school and also are considered as foundations for Mahamudra, which are the 2 reasons why I thought it would be neat for us to go through this text. Since we've been going through a Mahamudra text, and since Zhentong is such a both interesting and somewhat elusive topic. Somewhat repetitive. Today's reading also included this material from Carl's book, Mining for Wisdom Within Delusion, where he presents translations of the Dharma Dharmatava Bhanga and 3 commentaries on it by Vasubandhu, Rangchen Dorje, and Go Rampa Sakyapa. Rangchen Dorje being a Kagyu, Vasubandhu being a Yogacara, let's say, early Indian, the brother of a Sangha. So we really just went through this. And maybe we can just skip around and focus in on the fundamental change, meaning of the fundamental change. in Sanskrit, in the Sanskrit term. So the Sanskrit term for fundamental change is this tongue twister here, which is pronounced Ashraya Parivriti. So S with a little uh, uh, whatever you call that mark above it is SH Ashraya Parivriti. The R with a dot is pronounced like R-I Vritti, or Ashraya Para Vritti with a long A. Ashraya means basis, matrix, foundation, source, or origin. Ashraya is the basis. It refers to something to which something else is annex, or with which something is closely connected, or on which something depends or rests. This can be a person or a thing in which some quality is inherent or retained. It can also mean body, seat, place of refuge. More specifically, it refers to the five sense faculties and the mental sense faculties being the recipients of their respective objects, the basis for the experience of their specific objects. Primary meaning of the verbal noun parivriti, the second part of the term, is turning about, rolling, or revolution. It can also mean change, transmutation, removal, ending, termination, etc., etc., all these different meanings. The compound then is, in Sanskrit, there's four types of compounds, and it's a Tat Purusha compound, which can be taken to mean the change of the foundation or within the foundation, and the change and also the change by means of the foundation. Though the first one is the most common meaning, the change of the foundation. All three have been suggested as glosses by different Indian commentators. And so just for a minute, looking at these three options of how you understand this compound term of basis and change, basically, those two concepts. There's a basis and it changes. So is there the change of the foundation, which would imply like you change from one foundation to another foundation, or is there a change within the foundation, that foundation goes through a process of changing itself? So maybe they get a new president or a new CFO of the foundation, a new program staff, or they change their mission statement. I'm kidding, right? I'm talking about foundation as if it's a non-profit, but like the change within the foundation, the uh, the nature of the basis changes, or change by means of the foundation. So that foundation acts as the agent for change, implying that the foundation changes something else. The first one is the most common, that there's a change of the foundation, that the foundation um, it changes, which implies like there's a change from one foundation to another. But it's interesting to think about the meaning of that compounded concept or this topic. There seems to be a tendency of Parvati positively emphasizing replacement through something new and imply removal of something old, while Parivriti negatively emphasizes removal of the old, implying replacement with something new. So that's one person's view, Schmidhausen. Thus, when these terms are used in the sense of termination or removal of something, such as impurity, both imply replacement by something else, i.e., purity. Generally, however, it is clear that those two terms are used interchangeably, further evidenced by both consistently having been translated as in Chinese, I don't know how to say that, and mostly as ne or Yongsu Gyurpa in Tibetan, which it's too bad he doesn't, though one also finds he doesn't, oh shoot, I didn't capture the footnotes where presumably he gives the English for those, and I'm not going to. The first one is the basis completely changes. Yongsu is completely changes. And it could be understood as there's a change. So there's the basis thoroughly changes. Um, and then the second option is the basis changes. Ne is basis, cure is change into something else. Gen. And um, what was the third one? The third one is the, the it's a third option. He's basically giving the Tibetan for these three options of, change by means of, within, and then by means of. Anyway, both the origin and the context of the term are soteriological, liberating in nature, indicating a change from samsara to nirvana. The term generally emphasizes the result of the process rather than the process itself. There's a great variety of different explanations as to what exactly changes into what, which, just as a reminder to go back to, like, when we talk about enlightenment happening, does something change into something else, or do we change? Does some, like, experiencer change from an old pair of shoes to a new pair of shoes, or does the, the experiencer use the old version to become a new version, something like that? Often, no real change of anything into anything is implied, because that would imply that the nirvana and enlightenment are produced, compounded, um, dependent, and therefore unreliable and impermanent and so forth. But the result of the fundamental change is simply the revelation of the underlying true reality of all phenomena. So there's no real change of the basis, but there's a change in how we experience the basis or the reality. The result can be the new state of that foundation, such as the state of the purity of suchness, or the foundation itself in this new state. So the foundation gets transported into a new realm, such as suchness or Buddha nature, once it's been purified. There are a great number of Buddhist scriptures in which the term is used with reference to a variety of different states and processes. It's beyond the scope, thankfully, of him going through all those. Let's see. So I think we'll look at this lastly for tonight. So this idea of fundamental change as presented in various sutras, the Shravaka Bhumi, which is a text by a Sangha that presents the path of Shravaka, the path and accomplishment of Shravaka, and is like the most important condensation and compendium and explanation of the Hinayana path and the features of the Hinayana progression by a Mahayana teacher that exists. And given his time period of like 200 in the common era of a Sangha, he's like summing up the last 700 years in a very interesting way. And unfortunately, it's not translated yet, but someday it will be great to look at. So it's a key text. It extensively quotes a no longer existent Revata Sutra or Revata Sutra. And it doesn't contain the term, but it uses the similar term, the purity of the foundation, in a similar sense. So he's going to go through a listing. Let's see what are the interesting parts. And the Samdhinirmoshana Sutra, which is famous for presenting the three natures, for presenting non-conceptual wisdom, and for presenting the three turnings of the wheel of the Dharma, and for presenting the Alaya Vijnana. Manjushri, the defining characteristic of the Dharmakaya, the Tathagatas, is the perfect accomplishment of the fundamental change that is the outcome of having intensively cultivated the bhumis and paramitas. This change is to be understood as having the characteristic of being inconceivable, because it is without reference points and is free from anything to be formed. and because sentient beings cling to reference points of what is to be formed. So that's a little bit cryptic, but how is it? Are the fundamental changes of Shravakas and Prajnakas also to be called Dharmakaya? Which is interesting use of the word fundamental changes. Like, of those two types of beings, are they Dharmakaya? They are not Dharmakaya. Manjushri, they are liberation bodies. So bodhisattvas turn into Buddhas who have Dharmakayas, but um, hearers, Shravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas achieve liberation from samsara, and they have a body of liberation. Interesting distinction, creating like a different class of liberated beings in what is really something in much as sort of an early phase of Mahayana Sutra. The Lankavatara is really the most famous sutra in terms of using this term, Ashraya Parivritti. And it doesn't really provide any explanations of the term itself. And the sutra is like a hodgepodge of like seems like different texts pasted together. It has its continuity is not great. Um, so it's difficult to make a precise and consistent meaning of its use of the fundamental change. The only passage that comes close to an explanation of the term is once the dependent has become pure, so once the dependent nature has become pure and is thus free from conception, i.e., free from the imaginary, what it has changed into is suchness, and its abode is one in which conception is eliminated. So it becomes beyond conception. So again, as I said earlier, the dependent is understood to be the Alaya Vijnana of a sentient being. Which is sort of the mind-only way of understanding the three natures. Usually, often when we talk about the three natures, it feels like we're talking about external objects or independent objects. There's imaginary concepts that don't really exist. There's the dependent, which is the realm of phenomena that appear due to cause and effect. And we sort of imagine that all of the things that we experience in our world are like that. And then there's the consummate or perfected nature, which is the enlightened nature that resides in all sentient beings, either veiled by obscurations or actualized into Buddhas. Um, but in this tradition, the dependent is the alaya, the continuum of the eighth consciousness of a sentient being. So if the alaya Vijnana becomes pure and is free, thereby free from having the delusions of the conceptuality common to sentient beings. And it's helpful to read this sentence both without the parentheticals or bracketed terms and with. So you could say, what has changed is suchness. That's a very different statement than what it has changed into is suchness. So what it, the dependent, has changed into is suchness. So the dependent changes into the perfectly consummate nature. And this is one way of viewing the three natures, that when we purify the dependent of all of its imaginary mistaken conceptions, then it becomes the perfectly consummate enlightened nature of a Buddha. But that implies that there's this thing called the dependent that changes into something else. And another way of looking at it is when the dependent is purged of its mistaken conceptions arising from conceptuality, then the consummate nature becomes evident. Without saying the dependent continues and turns into the consummate. So, and those sort of present the two main ways of thinking about how does enlightenment happen? How does transformation happen? Is there some aspect of our mind stream that turns from the changes from being confused into being unconfused? Or do we shift from like the right side of the left side of our brain to the right side? It's like one part of our being is the confused, deluded part, filled with conceptions and imaginary, uh, the imaginary uh, conceptions that think that the dependently arisen phenomena that being experiences are real, that disappears, and the already present enlightened nature appears. So two different ways of viewing the change. And Carl's gloss on this is the fundamental change is described as the dependent nature having become purified of all conception, that is mind's false imagination or delusive construction of the duality of apprehender and apprehended, the imaginary nature. The result of the change is suchness, perfect nature, and the state in which that suchness abides is that is absolutely free from conception. So suchness by definition is uncreated, so you can't say that it becomes the suchness, because that would be um, a mistaken way of understanding suchness to say that it's created when we've already said that it's uncreated. Usually the sutra says that the Alaya consciousness, which is consistently identified with Tathagata Garbha, so this requires little comment. And when Tathagata Garbha idea appears in the different in the texts of the Buddhist tradition that appear over time throughout the history of Buddhism in India, the way Tathagata Garbha is understood and presented changes. And initially, it's presented as being like the true nature of the Alaya consciousness. So, as Carl is saying, in this sutra, the Alaya consciousness is identified with the Tathagata Garbha. It's like the purified version of the Alaya consciousness is the Tathagata Garbha. And then later, Tathagata Garbha is presented as separate from the Alaya consciousness. And in order for the Tathagata Garbha, Buddha nature, to become evident or actualized, whatever you want to call the transformation, one needs to eliminate the Alaya consciousness. So a development in the thought of how to explain the situation. Several passages speak about the removal of the impregnations of negative tendencies from the Alaya consciousness, so to purify the Alaya consciousness and reveal its Tathagata Garbha nature. In this early way of thinking about it as the following passage: the fundamental change is said to apply to the Alaya consciousness, the Tathagata Garbha, and to happen throughout the 10 bhumis. If the Alaya consciousness, which is known as the Tathagata heart, has not changed, the 7 operating consciousnesses do not cease. So those are the other 7 of the 8 consciousnesses: the ego consciousness, the mind, and the 5 sense consciousness. Through seeing the 5 dharmas, the 3 natures, and the identitylessness of phenomena. So we know what identitylessness of phenomena is. We've been talking about the 3 natures. The 5 dharmas is a way that this text sums up the essence of the Buddha Dharma, and I can't remember off the top of my head what they are, but it's sort of similar to the way the Abhidharma has matter, mind, mental factors, non-associated phenomena, and uncreated phenomena. The Tathagata heart becomes still when the evolution of the progression of the bhumis has changed. What does it mean when the Tathagata heart becomes still? It's no longer beating or something? I don't know. Thus it cannot be agitated. That's what it means by the views of the path of Tirthakas. So, the path of the Tirthakas is just like our own delusions. So the Tathagata heart cannot be agitated by our own delusions. On the other hand, some passages refer to Buddhahood and non-conceptual wisdom as the complete fundamental change or even the removal of all eight consciousnesses. So we see even in this one sutra, Lanka Sutra, different ways that the Alaya Vijnana and Buddha nature are presented and their relationship are presented, which represents this, and which is why it feels like this sutra is a conglomeration of separate texts that are pasted together, and those separate texts are like appeared or written at different times, representing the evolution of the thought of how to describe this weird thing called enlightenment. And those endowed with yoga in whom mind, meditation, and the mental consciousness. So this is, let's see, mind is equivalent to the eighth, meditation to the seventh, and mental consciousness the sixth, or really I think it includes the other five, have undergone the fundamental change. And those endowed with yoga in whom basically the eight consciousnesses have undergone the fundamental change, who have relinquished false conceptions. I added the word false, of apprehender and apprehended, that are appearances of their own minds, and who have attained the bhumi of a Tathagata and the personally experienced wisdom of the noble ones, discriminating notions about entities and non-entities do not arise, which is sort of uh, to be expected, given that the conceptions of apprehender and apprehended do not appear. They've relinquished those. Furthermore, a certain verse declares the Alaya is the pure foundation. So the Alaya, not the Alaya Vijnana, is the pure foundation of all beings, which exists without stains, just like Mercury. So we have this further progression. First we have Alaya Vijnana and Tathagata Garbha are the same. And then we have Alaya Vijnana and Tathagata Garbha are different. And then we have, what is the Alaya? What is it that Alaya Vijnana means a consciousness of the Alaya. But initially they don't actually talk about the Alaya. They just talk about Alaya consciousness, as if it's more like a fundamental consciousness, as opposed to later understanding it as being a consciousness of some object, the way that you have consciousness of the visual sense faculty and so forth. So then you have a consciousness of this thing called the Alaya. Whereas initially, Alaya Vijnana, it was a type of consciousness, like a way of describing the all-pervading consciousness or something. As the pure foundation, in some it is not clear whether the Alaya consciousness remains after the fundamental change, and if so, in what form. As part of the lack of clarity presented in the sutra, like what phase of the understanding of this metaphor, basically, that this sutra wants to present. In particular, this sutra describes the result of the fundamental changes, liberation, seeing suchness, which are based on realizing all appearances to be nothing but expressions of one's own mind. Quoting, let's see. And why don't we skip the quotes and go to Suzuki's summary. Now, D.T. Suzuki, amazing scholar, practitioner from the Zen tradition of Japan, was a groundbreaking scholar in bringing a lot of amazing texts and Mahayana, understanding of Mahayana into the West. Translated Lankavatara Sutra, wrote a sort of a collection of notes on it, and then in addition to a number of books on Zen, wrote a couple of really good books on Mahayana, one called Outlines of Mahayana Buddhism, and then Indian Mahayana Buddhism, which is my favorite. It's really good. And if it was ever reprinted in a viable way, it would be the source for a good course on Mahayana. When we are removed from the influence of false discrimination, the whole Vijnana system woven around the Alaya, capitalized as center, as center, the Alaya as center, experiences a revulsion. And so he's the one that makes famous this idea of the Lankavatara Sutra presenting a revulsion in the basis. And the word revulsion is interesting because it implies at the same time, it implies like a renunciation, revulsion, as well as like a revolution, like a turning around toward true perception, from false perception to true perception. This is the gist of the Lankavatara. This revulsion marks the culmination of the practical psychology of the Lankavatara. It is through this fact that the realization of the Pratyatmarya, blah, 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 is possible. I don't know what that is. And this realization is the central theme. I wish I knew what it was. Let's see. Jnana Gochra. It's the knowledge of all aspects, I think, which we saw in the Abhisamaya Lankara. As this event takes place in the Alaya, like an event at a point in time taking place in a location is an interesting idea for enlightenment. Or what is the same thing in the Tathagata, which is the base of all things, is known as Ashraya Parivritti, a revulsion at the basis. This idea, he presents this way of understanding enlightenment. His understanding of the Lankavatara Sutra is that the Alaya Vijnana turns around, and instead of like looking at its own the other seven consciousnesses and thinking that it exists as a separate individual entity or being, it turns around and it views the Alaya, it views Tathagata Garbha. It's like all of samsara is looking at the the sevenfold consciousness package as being me, and then enlightenment happens. We turn around and we look inward, or the other direction towards the Buddha nature that was always there. Ashraya means that on which anything is dependent, and in this case the Alaya is the ashraya, or the basis on which hangs the working of the consciousnesses, and consequently the birth of the universe, the reality. The new orientation takes place when the egocentric and evil creating discrimination based on dualism ceases by the realization there's no external world besides what is perceived within the self, and this realization is affected by the cultivation of the intellect known as non-discriminated and transcendental, which is this word here, which is a certain type of wisdom, jnana. Loka Aratara means going beyond the world, and Nirvikalpa means without discrimination. Vikalpa is discrimination. We must now look in the opposite direction, towards the quarter where no Vikalpa, discrimination, takes place, and where no evolution of the Vijnanas has set in. And this is a reference to the idea that the Alaya Vijnana evolves into the other Vijnanas. That on like in maybe both a cosmic sense, like event sense, like birth of the universe, as well as like on a momentary sense, the Alaya Vijnana, the basis which has all the propensities of this and that, manifests into this other seven consciousnesses, an I who feels like they have a mind, and sense consciousnesses. That's called the evolution of samsara, as opposed to the evolution of nirvana. An opening must be made to the non-discriminative and transcendental intellect. This is called revulsion. The eye that used to open to the external world now turns within to see what lies here. It is in the inner world where so many things we have been looking after are accessible now in your perception. Nirvana, emancipation, project, empowerment, cessation of seven Vijnanas, etc. The sudden turning is, in a sense, returning. The Alaya Tathagata Garbha returns by this to its original purity and eternal nature, which is above parivritti, is and nivritti, arising and disappearance. And the Alaya has been contaminated by external impurities, which is a really weird idea that there could possibly be something external when there's no external world. Hello. Amassed by all kinds of philosophizing based on the discrimination of subject and object. I think he means contaminated by our belief that there's an external realities, causes, impurities. Anyway, so that's next time we'll pick up on uh, we'll pick up here, turning about in the Dharma Dharmatava Bhanga, and then he has a section on non-conceptual wisdom I included, which I think is helpful. Somewhere in here. Anyway, it's time to stop. So hopefully that is helpful and not just sort of a blur. And, like it's sort of, in thinking about this course and like how to design what we're doing, there's, on the one hand, this tendency, like, let's just dive into the text. And I've had many courses where we just dive into these very difficult to understand texts. And then we have to like backtrack and like go into like these explanations by others of like what's going on in the text. And so I don't know. I decided on this one, we'll start with the explanation and then we'll go through the text in the hope that then when we read the text, the poetry of the text, along with commentaries by Vasubandhu and Mipam, that we then gain further understanding, greater understanding at that point. Let's close with our dedication. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. I didn't let you guys say a word. Any comments, thoughts, reactions? Neil, nice to see you. Lindsay, sorry to go on so long that you had to leave. Neil.
What exactly do they mean by purifying?
Well, that's the crux. That's like, what is transformation? What is the transformation? Purify. Literally it means to eliminate impurity. And so that sets up a framework of like, what is the basis that's being purified of impurity, as well as what is the impurity, and then who does the purifying, who does that purifying, and it's all this. It's like explaining the inexplicable. How do we explain how enlightenment happens? Does enlightenment happen by a sentient being purifying their mind stream, purifying their Buddha nature? So then what happens to the sentient being when they're done purifying their Buddha nature? Why did the Buddha nature get impure? And so forth.
Oh, you
I would just
do
just
everything and
Sorry.
do nothing, and then shazam, it happened. That's what they were saying. Just shazam. So we're just waiting for that shazam to happen. That's all.
Anyway, I think the whole course will be about that idea and what does that mean. So I think we'll revisit that over and over again. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night. See you soon.
Good night.
Oh, and the recording.